Hello and welcome to the Astranti Top 10 Most Likely Unseen Issues video for the operational case study of February 2018. In this video we'll be going through what I consider to be the top 10 issues that will most likely come up in your exam in February. Okay, so what's the point of this video? How's it going to help you in your exam? So what we would recommend you do after watching these videos are to go through some of these steps here, and these will help you to prepare for the exam in February. So for one thing, once the issues have been identified, that we've gone through the 10 issues in this video, you can start to prepare key models for pre-seen information. And for each of the top 10 issues, we will be suggesting certain theory, certain models that you can use in preparation for that issue. The main thing to remember there is that when you are preparing models based on certain issues, it's important to adapt those models for any new information that you get in the unseen exam. And the unseen is just the exam that you sit in February. So for instance, if you prepare a pestle analysis in response to one of the issues that might come up, and then you come into the exam and you get some information on one of the areas, say some new political information or some new legal information, then you should adapt that, include that knowledge in your pestle and use that going forward. It's no good just using your analysis of the pre-seen. You do need to be able to work with the new information provided to you in the exam. You can practice mock exams as well, so that's probably, of all the students that we've dealt with in the past, one of the key things that they say helps them the most is to practice mock exams. Now, Astranti, we produce a set of mock exams based on these top 10 issues themselves. So we identify them, then we write our mock exams based on those issues that we think most likely to come up. So if you do those mock exams, then you've almost sort of already had a practice go or a couple of practices at the exam. So when you come to sit the real thing, you'll be in a much stronger position. Okay, so one thing that the examiner likes to see in your exam script is a wider understanding of the industry. And one way you can do that is to include real life industry examples. By which I mean you could, in this case, the industry is the crystal manufacturing and glass blowing industry. So if you were to look in the real life industry and look at companies like Dartington or Swarovski or any of the major crystal manufacturers, look at what they've been doing, and if it's relevant, including them as an example in your exam, and then that shows the examiner that you've gone beyond just what's in the pre-seen. You have a thorough understanding of the industry, and you can get good marks for that. So one thing you can do there to help you with that is to take a look at our industry analysis. We have an actual document and video for that, in which we have 25 real life examples based on the crystal blowing manufacturing industry. So if you learn some of those going into your exam, you'll have those ready to pull out straight away. You could also learn the typical key points for each of the issues we've raised. So for example, if you get, if for one of the issues, say, were the benefits or the possibility of outsourcing one of the functions of the company, then in that case, you can learn the typical advantages and disadvantages of outsourcing without really having to do much more. But again, remember that you are applying it to the scenario, adapting it to what's giving you to the unseen. So you could list some normal advantages and disadvantages and perhaps one or two more specifically relating to the case. And there you're kind of doing the work before you go into the exam, giving you more time to sort of prepare answers in the exam itself. Okay, and finally, it's going to help you to be prepared for which models to use in the exam. So obviously going through everything you studied so far at F1 and P1 and in particular E1, there's lots of models in theory. There's so many different things that could come up. But by identifying these top 10 issues, you can kind of focus on those things that are most likely to come up, and you can be prepared. So if you know that, or if there's a good chance that there's going to be a question on marketing, then you could refer to the marketing material and perhaps use the 4 Ps in your answer. If there's likely going to be a competitor analysis, then you might use something like the pestle analysis. And so you know which models to use, which ones are most appropriate for the various issues that could come up. Okay, so for each of the issues that we cover, I'm going to be explaining why I chose that and why I think it will come up in the exam. And there'll be a few reasons for the basis of my choice in each case. So firstly, there's going to be a sort of focus on the pre-scene and whether or not this is kind of a certain issue is often hinted at in the pre-scene. So in the actual pre-scene itself, I identified a number of issues that they were covered in the pre-scene analysis. So I would recommend checking out those videos if you haven't already. And just to give you some examples of the things we noted in the pre-scene, some of the most key issues. Yeah, there were some issues with the product range. There were obviously a lot. There were 108 different lines that the company did, but there were only a small area of the entire glassware industry that they're focusing on, so there may be room for diversification there. New competitors entering the market that poses a threat for the company and perhaps risk. So certain things that came up in the pre-scene over and over again, they're the kind of those are likely to come up in the exam. And in a similar way, certain things have a degree of importance attached to them by the examiner. So you have to think of this when you're going through the pre-scene. Obviously, this has been made by CIMA, and they're making it in a way so that when the exam comes in February, they've got certain things built into it that are easily examinable. So as we go through the pre-scene, I've been keeping an eye on that, and those will be that will be the basis of my choice. Will be sort of reading between the lines and thinking what the examiner can do with the information they've provided. Another element of the basis of my choice will be strategic importance. So in the strategic analysis video, again, another video in this series that I would recommend having a look at if you haven't seen it. We finished that with a SWOT analysis and we came up with a business strategy for the company. Now, identifying those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats gave us a focus for what the company should be doing, and that helped again in the identification of the key issues for them going forwards. And in a similar vein, these are the things that the directors are likely to be concerned about from a strategic standpoint. And so if anything anything mentioned in the pre-scene as well that the directors are particularly concerned with, again, that suggests it could come up in the exam. And finally, my experience is something to go on. So I've been involved in the OCS for a while now, and I've seen lots of the past exams and lots of the kind of issues that they like to bring up. So certain typical issues come up in pretty much every exam. And in that case, it's fair to assume that CIMA are planning a question on that in the next exam too. Also, as I've sort of touched on, the pre-scene's written in a way so that certain issues are examinable when the exam comes itself, and certain issues are a lot easier to examine than others, and sort of those ones that tend to be easier are the ones that end up in the exam, and in that case those are the ones that I'll be suggesting as our top 10 issues. Okay, so that's it for the introduction explaining the reason for my choices. We'll just continue on and have a look at the top 10 issues now. Okay, so our first issue to look at is going to be risk management. Now, just as a quick side note, these issues are numbered from 10 to 1, but they're not ordered in terms of priority. So issue number 1 isn't necessarily any more likely to come up than issue number 10. They're just the way they've been numbered. Any of these issues are as likely to come up as any of the other ones. So I chose this one because it's a key P1 topic, and as we mentioned, certain topics are more easily examinable than others, and almost any company can have some kind of risk management, risk analysis question. So obviously in the P1 syllabus, we do a bit of risk identification. There is some covering of the risk management techniques, and also in addition to that, there's an element where you suggest controls to manage risks. All of this part of the P1 syllabus, all of this fairly easy to examine, and it has often come up in the exams in the past, recently, and pretty much throughout the history of OCS. There is usually a risk analysis, risk management question in some form or another. So the likely issues in a risk management question would be some kind of management or control of risk. And that's going to be either on a project, so there'll be a new project or an existing project suggested. Perhaps in the case of this company, it might be developing a new product line or an acquisition or whatever it may be. And in that case, there will be certain risks that either you have to identify or risks that have already been identified, and you need to suggest ways of managing and controlling them. You might also get a risk management question that just focuses on the organization as a whole. Okay, so rather than the specific risks of an investment or a new product, it'll be looking at King Crystal and saying, okay, what risks does the whole organization face as an entity? Other issues or other sort of categories of issues would be how risk should be managed. So the risk has been identified and potentially assessed to an extent by someone in the company, and your job will be to suggest ways or models or methods by which risk can be managed in the company. So in that case, you'll be sort of perhaps asked to talk about the COSO risk methodology. Perhaps it will be the suggestion of an audit committee or setting up an audit committee to make sure risk is overseen and controlled. And perhaps there also may be a suggestion of the culture at the company and cultural approach, such as suggesting risk control in that vein. Okay, so the idea there is that, as I've said, the risk has been identified. You will be suggesting sort of tools or strategies or ideas for the management in order to manage the risk. So when a risk management question comes up, there are some things that you should definitely be including in your answer. So for one, if it's to do with key risks that the company faces, then you're gonna be using the risks that we identified in the pre-scene analysis. So some of those are included here. So the cost of raw materials. The main issue there is that raw materials or the main raw materials are acquired through a single supplier strategy, and that means that one supplier supplies individual products, the individual raw materials. Some of the raw materials may be subject to changes in price, exposing the company to adverse changes in the price of commodities. Any extreme change in price is going to, if it's an adverse change, is going to increase the cost of production, and the company already has a fairly low operating profit margin, so this could ultimately lead to reduction in profits and potentially even losses. Okay, also there are new entrants, these new entrants to the market, the smaller artisan entrepreneur glassblowers. These are taking an increasing portion of the market share, and they're offering products and a wide range of products that King Crystal aren't currently offering. So there's risk of being losing the share of the market in that case. Okay, if it's a more general question about how to approach risk management within the company, you would want to mention the importance of the ERM or the embedded risk methodology. You'd want to mention the importance of risk management at the operational level and how it's still important thing to do at operational level as well as strategic and at management levels. And you'd also want to explain exactly how your control, if you're suggesting a control for a risk, how your control will manage the risk. It's no good just saying, this is my control. You need to explain what the control would do, how it manages the risk, if you get a question along those lines. Okay, so that's risk management. As we said, a likely topic to come up, so do expect something to come up in that way in one form or another. The next issue for us to take a look at is governance. So why have I chosen governance here? Well, we've got a small private business. They've been around for quite a while and they slowly developed over time, kind of organically. There was the management buyout back in 2000. A lot of the senior directors, the executives and the directors are come from sort of glass-blowing backgrounds. There isn't much sort of business education at the company, so there's a pretty good chance that they've overlooked governance as they've been going forwards, and so it's certainly an area that they could improve, and it's been identified as an area of potential weakness for the company. Okay, so even if we weren't considering the size and the history of the business, governance is an important issue for any company, no matter what size, or whether it's private or public or whatever it is. It's really important to have defined roles and responsibilities for the management and governance of the company. There's also an element, there's something a little bit off about the ownership structure. So in this case, you've got the managing director, who is also the majority shareholder of the company, and that can lead to certain, there's a lot of power there for one person to have, and that could lead to certain issues with regards to governance. Okay, so any issues likely to come up to do with governance might be a dispute between the key management, perhaps the managing director and another of the directors, or perhaps two of the directors. Could be a dispute over resources or budgets or involvement, or perhaps there even may be a dispute over the dividend that was paid during the year. There could be preparation for an external audit, so sometimes companies need to have external audits, and in order for the audit to go well, they have to meet a certain number of externally imposed standards, which they may not currently be meeting, so they have to review the governance to make sure the audit passes in that respect. There might be general concerns about governance from the other investors. We know the company is made up of 4 investors. The managing director, as we said, owns 55%, and then there are 3 other investors who own 15% each, and there may be concern from the investors that the majority shareholder is also the managing director, or there might be concerns over the general running of the company. There may be scope to set up internal committees in order to manage governance and different functions of the business slightly better than are currently being managed at the moment. And there may even be the need to establish non-executive director branch of the board just to fulfill that role and to give some sort of general for long-term advice and to help the business in that respect. Okay, so for a governance question, the main things to mention, again, for one, governance, as we've said, is essential to any successful business, whether that's public, private, or whatever it is. Governance is important. Good governance leads to good management of a company and also ultimately successful companies. Bad governance, you may get away with that for a while, but eventually something's going to slip, and so it's better to get on top of it sooner rather than later. There are legal requirements, so they're not as strict for private companies as they are for public companies, but there are still legal requirements for all businesses to follow. So if there are any places where the company is failing to meet legal requirements, then it's a good job. It's good in a position now as they're growing to address those and fix it going forward. And perhaps in the long term, if the company ever have long-term plans to become listed and become publicly traded, then the criteria for being listed, they're very, very strict governance rules. And so a lot would need to be done to reach those. And so if that's a long-term goal, they want to start getting somewhere near that as soon as possible. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And I'll just take a few moments of your time, if I could, to just tell you about some of the other case study materials that we offer. So one of the things is a study text. Now this is a study text specifically aimed at the case study, and we have one for each level. So we have an operational, management and strategic level one, and they're designed to help you pass the study. They're in 2 halves. The first half is exam tips and exam strategy and advice on how to answer questions and all the really useful kind of tips that you need going into these exams and how to prepare for them. And then the second half, the second part of those, is a recap of the key theory that always comes up in the case studies again and again. So those are really useful, really valuable thing that you can get. Those are available online, and you can get an actual textbook, a printed physical textbook for the old-fashioned among you who like to do it that way still. We also have course videos that correspond with that study text as well. So we have a series of really nicely well-produced, well-done videos in which we basically take you through exactly what's involved in the case study and how you can spend your time preparing for it to ensure that you get really good marks. It's really, really great series of videos there. We've got the pre-scene analysis, which the video you just watched is an example of the pre-scene analysis, and there'll be several more videos just like that where we look at every tiny detail of the pre-scene and we relate it back to the P1 or F1 or E1, and we relate it to real life scenarios, relate it to actual business and analysis tools, and we give you the what we expect to be the top 10 issues. Another thing that we do is slightly different is the industry analysis, and that is this is a really great document in which we basically cover everything that's relevant to the industry for the particular business that we're looking at. And it goes from their history through to the customers and suppliers and the market and how the market has functioned and the history of that. And we've got statistics in there and diagrams, and it's full of information. It's so useful. And at the end of that pack, we also have 25 actual industry examples, so real life things that have happened in that industry, that kind of examples of things that might actually happen to the company in the exam. So it gives you a sense of the kind of things that are going on in the industry and how real life businesses in that industry have coped with it. We have mock exams, which are, if you were going to pick any one of these to do, I would suggest it was the mock exams, because nothing prepares you for the exam more than actually sitting a mock exam. And if I were a student taking this, I would certainly put mock exams at the top of my list, along with marking and feedback. Now, our mock exams are actually designed to match the way that the actual CIMA exams are, so you can sit them on your laptop and they'll be timed and automatic, and they are as close as you are going to get to the real thing. And you can get marking and feedback on that as well, which is probably the most valuable thing you could probably get. To get specific feedback from a marker who deals with this exam 4 times a year, that's the best way for you to improve your ability to pass this exam as quickly as possible. We also have a masterclass, so as an online company we hold an online masterclass which you can sign up for, and it's a day over the weekend. We do the Saturday and a Sunday, and it's a full day's worth of we have an expert who takes an online seminar, and we go through everything specific to that case study that you can do to get prepared for the exam, and we cover all sorts, and it's very, very popular among students who like a one-on-one kind of classroom environment in an online situation. We also offer pass guarantee, so if you're unlucky enough to not pass your exam the first time round, then there's no worries, because we give you the option. If you choose a pass guarantee option, then as long as you hit all the minimum requirements that we ask, and you don't pass, then you get access to our materials for the next sitting completely free of charge. So there's something that we're doing to try and get you. Hopefully, if you signed up to our course and you do everything that we say you should do, then you probably will pass first time. That tends to be the way it goes. But if you should be unfortunate, if it's a particularly tough exam, then we'll let you have another go for free. So that's it. Thanks again for watching. Remember, my name is James. You can find me on Facebook, James Nutting Astranti, where I'll be posting all sorts of information about the upcoming exam in February. Make sure you check that out because there's always something to talk about with regards to that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.